Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined this evening by two excellent guests, two people I've not spoken to in quite a wee while actually. First by Effie Samara, who is a writer and doctoral researcher at Glasgow University. So Effie, how are you this evening?
Hello, I'm well, thanks Kenny.
Great. And on the other side of me, we've got Fatima Joji, who is from the Aberdeen Independence Movement and is also a director of the 50/50 Parliament. Fatima, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Really well, thank you.
Excellent. Well, we start this evening, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. And as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there had been a total of 128,495 coronavirus tests concluded. Of these, 112,842 were negative, 15,653 tests were positive. There were 641 people in hospital last night, 15 of whom were in intensive care, with another 6 who had suspected COVID-19 also in intensive care. This marks an increase of 14 confirmed new cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection has sadly risen to 2,422. The latest UK daily figures available show that 40,883 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 286. And this number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And also today, because it's Wednesday, we have the National Records of Scotland figures. And between the 1st and the 7th of June, there were 89 deaths in Scotland related to COVID-19 registered, a decrease of 42 from the previous week. Deaths involving COVID-19 as a proportion of all deaths has now fallen to 8% in week 23, having reached 36% in week 17. This is the 6th weekly reduction in a row of deaths involving COVID-19. This takes the total of COVID-19 related deaths in Scotland to exactly 4,000. To place these numbers in context, the total number of deaths registered in Scotland from the 1st to the 7th of June was 1,093, which is 4% higher than the average number of deaths registered in the same week over the last 5 years. Since the 878 excess deaths reported in week 15, the number of excess deaths has decreased week on week to just 37 in week 23. There were fewer deaths from respiratory diseases, which were down 33, and dementia and Alzheimer's down 19, compared to the average for this time of year. As a result, the number of deaths where COVID-19 was the underlying cause, which was a total of 73, was greater than the total number of excess deaths. Just less than half of all registered deaths involving COVID-19 in week 23 occurred in care homes, 47%, down from 60% high in week 18. The number of deaths in care homes fell for a 6th week in a row, down by 27 from last week to 42. And 3/4 of registered deaths involving COVID-19 to date were people aged 75 or over, a total of 76%. And before we come to the rest of the news tonight, if you want to get involved in the conversation tonight, then please do join us on Twitter. You can follow us at BroadcastScot, and you can join us using the hashtag Scotland@7. That's hashtag Scotland7. So please do get involved. We'll be flashing those up on the screen as you just saw there during the show. Our first story tonight is on Test and Protect. And the first set of data from week 1 of the coronavirus Test and Protect system in Scotland has been published. The data, which is due to be published weekly from now on, shows that the number of positive index cases from the 28th of May to the 7th of June, the number of index cases where contact tracing has been completed, and the number of contact traces. And since Test and Protect was launched, 681 cases have tested positive, with 741 contacts traced. The level of data published will continue to improve once the data is robust and validated. And Cabinet Secretary for Health, Jeane Freeman, said, since the 28th of May, contact tracers across the country have followed up each new positive test to ensure those who may have come into contact with the virus take steps to isolate. By doing so, we can break the chains of transmission while slowly changing lockdown measures. The average number of people traced for each positive case reflects that we are still in phase 1 of lifting lockdown restrictions, and people should not be mixing with large numbers of people outside their own household. I would encourage anyone who has symptoms of COVID-19 to come forward as early as possible and get a test immediately to help us suppress the spread of the virus. And Effie, if I could come to you first here, these are quite interesting numbers. 680, I think 681, did I say? 681 tested cases and only 741 contacts, which does suggest that people really aren't making a lot of contacts while lockdown is still in place.
Yeah, is it? I'm not quite sure how the system works. Is it that we are still in lockdown and people are still isolated, or is it that people have not been contacted or have not made their contacts known to the system? I'm not quite sure how it works. Perhaps you fill me in on that. Actually, how does the trace and protect system works? Once you declare that you have got the virus, do they then contact your the people that you've been in contact with, or is it that they have to download the app as well to be contacted?
No, there's no app involved. This is all human work.
Right,
so basically, you just tell somebody if
Oh,
you get a
just human
positive
work,
test,
okay.
you say, I've been in touch with these people, I've been to these places, and then people will make those chase up those contacts. It's a very human
Right.
process.
Okay. So. Yeah, it's a very human way of doing it, and I just wanted really to draw the contrast here between obviously what's been happening in England with the system, which we have heard. I mean, I just read in the Guardian that they have said it may not be ready until before September, which is quite a statement to make, considering that, we knew about this as of the end of January. The British government were aware of this. The WHO had made this known to them. And also, I understand that the Scottish system is Scottish NHS based and Scottish government based, and there will be no harvesting of data. There will be no issues involving private companies. For example, the system down south is handled by Serco and by Palantir, I believe, the American data company. So these are important issues, and obviously it also I think it demonstrates that Scotland has dealt with it generally better, and we have listened to the government. And pretty much from anecdotal evidence, I still have not met anyone, and the people that I've been in contact with via telephone or FaceTime, people with big families, they say to me, no, I still haven't seen my grandparents. I'm not going to see my aunt because she suffers from asthma. So there are no big gatherings, not that I know of, planned as yet. So it's, and it's been really good news as well with the numbers of deaths. Obviously, even one death is a tragedy, but there's been a dramatic drop in that as well. So without getting too brave, perhaps, some good signs on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fatima, as Effie says, this is a different kind of system than they're proposing down south, where it's been outsourced to Serco, whereas here it's all been the NHS, and there's no technology involved. This is just human beings contacting other human beings. It seems to be a much more effective way of getting things done, doesn't it?
Yeah, certainly I agree, and it also shows that we understand our responsibility to follow guidelines and stick to them. Considering what's going on now, we are unfortunately not in a situation where we have one form of guidance for the whole United Kingdom. I just wish we were all on one side personally, because it is a bit confusing. We keep having to drive home the message that recommendations in England are not the same as in Scotland. So to be honest, when I look at what's going on in Scotland, I applaud the Scottish government for the approach they're taking and for the way they're going about the testing system. I'm a bit worried when I look at the situation in England as well. They're reporting higher rates and also easing the restrictions much more quickly than we are here, or much more quickly than I think should be happening. And if you also look at the guidance from the World Health Organization as well, I do feel that they should listen to it more. And the fact that they don't have their system up and running as I feel they should be to an appropriate level, they're easing restrictions. So I'm a bit worried about reports of a possible second wave. And I just wish that people could also understand their own responsibility to stay home and isolate if they have any symptoms, that's including fever. So yeah.
Well, that of course is why people should watch Broadcasting Scotland, because we only look at things through a Scottish lens. We don't listen to Westminster unless we have to. But speaking of Westminster, at Westminster today, the SNP Deputy Westminster Leader, Kirsty Blackman MP, today called for the Prime Minister to challenge his ally, US President Donald Trump, over actions taken by American police against peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters across the country. Boris Johnson had previously said that Trump has many, many good qualities, and Blackman asked if he stood by that remark. She also called on the UK government to halt exports of tear gas and baton rounds to the US, and we spoke to her earlier. We have a wee clip to show you. So hi, Kirsty. Can I ask, first of all, why did you choose to raise this issue of Donald Trump with the Prime Minister today? And what did you make of the Prime Minister's response?
So I have had so many emails from my constituents about Black Lives Matter and about their concerns about what's happening in America. And given that in Aberdeen, our third nationality, so we've got UK and then we've got Polish, Romanian and then Nigerian. So I've got a significant number of Black constituents compared to most places in Scotland. So we've had a lot of concerns raised about this, and it really was the one issue that I wanted to go on this week. Now, I'm hugely concerned by the fact that Boris Johnson has previously said that Donald Trump has got many, many good qualities. And I thought I would give him the opportunity to say, actually, he's got some criticisms of what's happened in America, because the fact that he said that America is a bastion of peace, for a start, it's wrong, but also it's absolutely insulting at this time to all of those people who are protesting and have been victims of brutality over there. So I give him the opportunity to clear up the record on that, and he spectacularly failed to do so.
Yeah. Why is it you think that the Tories are usually quite okay with criticising, for example, the crackdown on protesters in Hong Kong, but far less willing to make even the mildest criticisms of the United States?
Well, it feels like some of the Tories are still trying to hang on to this special relationship that we've apparently had with the US. Doesn't seem to me like it's much of a special relationship. If we're exporting them millions of pounds of riot gear and they're using that against their citizens who are legitimately protesting and against journalists who are legitimately covering those protests, then I actually think this is the time for them to stand up and say, we're not happy about this, we're going to stop these exports, and we believe that the US needs to fundamentally reform the racist structures within its society. And just to be clear, it's not just the US that has got problems with structural racism. I raised the issue with Priti Patel earlier this week about the structural racism that there is within the Home Office as well. So clearly we need to look inwards at making sure we make improvements, as well as looking at the US and raising criticisms of the way that they are dealing with this current crisis.
Mm-hmm. You've raised 2 points I want to come back to there. So the first one, on tear gas. It's illegal to use tear gas in a war zone. That's a war crime, and yet it's still legal to use it on civilian protests in this country, and we're exporting it to other countries. Why is it still legal for civilian use?
Do you know what? I honestly don't know. It seems like an utterly horrendous thing that you should not be doing to people. People should not be treated in that way. Even if they are protesting, it seems you're right. The fact that it is a war crime, but the fact that it's legitimate to use it against civilians of your own country, it just seems like a shocking issue with the law that there is there. And certainly the issue with exporting it, we should not be exporting tear gas, we should not be exporting rubber bullets to countries like that. We previously called for the UK to stop exporting things to Saudi that are used against citizens in Yemen and the war in Yemen. And, once again, this is another place the UK needs to take a cold, hard look at itself and change its policies and stop those exports.
Mm-hmm. And have you had any sort of indication that is something that the government plans to review?
Well, the Tories are doing their usual, stick their head in the sand and pretend that it's not happening. But given the momentum that there is of the Black Lives Matter movement, given the strength of feeling that there is out there, given the absolutely massive number of emails that I and other parliamentarians have received about this, I think it would be very difficult for the Tories to continue to ignore this. But we know that they don't have a great track record on this. Keir Starmer raised at PMQs the issue of the Lamy report that has not yet been enacted. The government have not taken up those those issues about black people in the criminal justice system in England. So I would hope that the UK government would take this opportunity to try and make a difference, but I'm not hugely hopeful, to be honest.
Yeah, and as you said, there are issues of racism within our own society, both historically and currently, from our history with slavery all the way to the hostile environment and the Windrush scandal. Now, we've seen some statues come down, but what other things do you think that the British government and the Scottish government need to be looking at in terms of changes that we can make to the way our society is organised?
Well, for a start, I think we need to listen to people. I think we need to make sure that, I, as a white woman, have not experienced the systematic racism, the systems-based racism, nor the casual racism, if you like, that there is. And I need to take my opportunity in this position as an MP to listen to folk, to listen to their experiences, and also to hear from them what we should change, what I should be using my platform to call for. I think one of the most important things is learning about that history. So making sure that kids are educated about the history of Britain's colonial past and Scotland's part in that. We can't shy away from the fact that Scotland had a significant part within that empire, particularly in relation to slavery. But we can also hold up the fact that Glasgow University, for example, is paying reparations as a result of their issues with the slave trade, their involvement in the slave trade in the past. But we need to make sure that everybody learns about this shared history that we have, so that we know about those mistakes that we made in the past, so we know about the atrocities that we committed, and so we can make sure that they don't happen again.
Well, Kirsty Blackman, thanks very much for joining us today. And that was Kirsty Blackman speaking to us a bit earlier. Fatima, if I could come to you first, is Kirsty actually your MP?
No, she's not my MP, but I do stay in Aberdeen.
Yeah.
So anyway,
what did you make of Kirsty's question and the Prime Minister's response today?
I'm glad she raised it, and I'm really, really concerned about the Prime Minister's response. He said that the US is a bastion of peace and freedom, and has been in his lifetime. And I assume he's saying this while looking at what's going on on the not even just the telly, but also understanding the approach the US is taking towards Black Lives Matter and protesters who are out there fighting for their rights. So, and he's also given this response to a nation that's diverse, and some of whom are directly impacted by what's going on in America. So yes, I'm really concerned that this is his response, this is his attitude, and the fact that he's got people in this country as well who are directly impacted. And the fact that I understand that comparisons have been made between what's going on in the States and what's been going on here. But also it doesn't matter at what scale. This is also a time for us not to make comparisons and actually look at what's going on wrong in our own country and right it. And his response is basically telling me, anyone belonging to the Black community, that we're not going to get a chance to right the wrong, because he doesn't believe that anything wrong is happening. So yeah, I'm concerned, and I'm glad Kirsty raised it, and I know where he stands.
Yeah. And Effie, coming to you, I mean, this idea of the US being a bastion of peace and freedom throughout Boris Johnson's lifetime. During Boris Johnson's lifetime, Black people weren't allowed to vote in America. So what do you make of this kind of ahistorical attitude from the Prime Minister?
I'm not surprised. Boris Johnson is intellectually one of the laziest people you could ever hope to meet. So don't be looking to him to make valid historical comparisons. Also, every assessment that he makes and every judgment that he makes is always tainted by the fact that he is a believer, a very firm believer in a system of. It's hard actually to find the right term for this. Should I use neoconservatism? Should I use neo-fascism? Should I use, you have a big selection there, and this is his belief. Now, if you followed his writings right from the end of the 80s, the Boris Johnson has not changed. He's a believer in that system. He subscribes to the ultra liberal, not liberal, the ultra neoliberalist system within the United States, which basically says that you can buy morality, you can buy right, you can buy justice with money. You can buy health and education with money. I'm not, in the least bit surprised. I do remember, though, however, and I think at the time I was still a resident of London when he came out, and I think it's also still available on YouTube, that little clip where he said he would invite Donald Trump to London when he was London mayor, but he did not wish to subject Londoners to Donald Trump's presence. So it just demonstrates that he's cunning. So he knows about Trump, but obviously now, they are connected in different ways. Their interests are connected in different ways. We know that Trump, even while Theresa May was prime minister, Trump was promoting Johnson. He said that he believed that Johnson would be a brilliant prime minister. So, you wouldn't expect to hear any different. In regards to the ahistorical approach, we could write a book about it. The United States is not a beacon for equality. I'm afraid also that this is a global problem. Some areas, some countries are more prepared to recognize racism and systemic racism. Some countries less. But if you look at the statistics and if you look at research and just read any book from any academic in the United States, one of the very first items that's going to come up is how the Black community is criminalized for absolutely no reason at all, and the statistics are actually absolutely beyond anything you could ever imagine. So I think it's that you have 72% more chance of being stopped if you're a Black driver. You have, for the same offense, there's a huge difference in the ratio of the chances of being imprisoned for exactly the same offense. Black women are murdered by the police. They are taken by the police without questioning, without due process, and these things are not recorded and documented properly. So absolutely not, disagree with him. I always disagree with him, but, you'd have to be insane to take this seriously.
Yeah. Well, staying on the subject of the Prime Minister, the SNP has said that Boris Johnson must listen to the scientific advice on the 2-metre social distancing rule instead of rushing to reduce it while the coronavirus risk remains high. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, Ian Blackford MP challenged the Prime Minister to listen to the experts after he admitted, "I do not actually read the scientific papers," at the last session of the Liaison Committee. The SNP's Westminster leader warned the Prime Minister he was losing the confidence of the public over his handling of coronavirus following a series of damaging decisions and U-turns. An Ipsos Mori poll for BBC Scotland found that 55% of people in Scotland think Boris Johnson has handled the crisis badly. Separate polling by YouGov this week found the UK government has the lowest net approval rating worldwide for how it has handled the coronavirus crisis at -15. And Fatima, I don't think it'll surprise many people in Scotland that Boris Johnson isn't wildly popular here, but the fact that he's so unpopular or so untrusted across the whole UK now after such a big win in the election in December is not a good look for the Tories, is it?
Absolutely not. And we can also see that some Tories are actually speaking up now regards to his actions, whether it's over his response to Dominic Cummings or other instances. So it is very telling, but I'm a bit worried that it might not even have that much impact on the next election, because we've somehow built a system that allows people like Boris to get away with doing so much damage. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we'll just move on because this is somewhat linked. The SNP has ramped up pressure on the Tory government to commit to serious investment in the economy, the strengthening of financial and welfare measures, and to rule out a return to austerity, after a damning OECD report warned that the UK will suffer the worst economic impact from the coronavirus pandemic of any developed country. In its findings, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development forecast that the UK will witness an 11.5% slump in GDP this year, in contrast to other developed economies including Germany at 6.6%, Spain at 11.1%, France at 11.4% and Italy at 11.3%. The Scottish Government's Finance Secretary earlier renewed calls for the devolution of financial powers to protect Scotland's economy, businesses and jobs from Tory austerity, stating that the devolved arrangements were not designed for a health emergency and an economic crisis of this scale. No, this is, I think, linked in part, Effie, to the fact that Britain has the worst death toll now of any country in the world per capita. And the link to that, the economic crisis, is clearly going to be just as bad for us. What do you think the big mistakes that have been made on the economic front have been?
Well, the biggest mistake was to place the economy before human life. In a case like this, and obviously, this is a first. I think in any one of our lifetimes, there has not really been there have been epidemiological sort of issues, but they were more regional. So we haven't had a pandemic of this scale over the last maybe close to about 100 since really the Spanish flu. So there isn't a huge amount of precedent for whoever happens to be alive or within the administration at the moment, but putting economics before human life was, in my judgment, the first tragic mistake that they made. And then trying to delay every phase against the advice of the World Health Organization, which was blatantly, and also the evidence that was coming through from Italy and from China at the time. I mean, it was only a few weeks ago that obviously the Italian, the deaths in Italy were happening, and the British press were reporting these as absolutely horrific. And then when this started to happen here, the Murdoch-led press found this to be, quite a natural thing. So you have that, coupled also obviously with the idea that the economy, the UK economy, is not led on notions of things like well-being, for example, or supporting the lower economic, those who are economically more vulnerable, and seeking always to lighten the burden on corporations. Now, you will suffer from that. And Brexit, Brexit is a catastrophic thing to be happening any day of the week, but adding this to a pandemic, I'm not looking forward to 2021. Yeah,
and Fatima, to come back to you again, this economic crisis, clearly this is going to be a big rebuilding job. Do you have any confidence that the UK government will avoid another round of austerity to help that rebuilding happen?
Put it simply, I don't think so. Because if we look at the government that we have, rather disappointingly, this is a government that we even consider basic intervention that we have been fighting for, such as universal basic income. And even with universal basic income, we will expect a lot of hardship coming this way. And now this is a economy, as mentioned, that puts, this is a country, as mentioned, that puts the economy before well-being, and forgetting the simple basic fact that people make the economy go round. It can't get it much simpler than that. And yeah, no, I don't. I'm afraid austerity is going to be hitting us really hard.
Yeah, well, speaking of people's income suffering, the SNP has again called on the UK government to introduce grants instead of advanced loans and scrap the 5-week wait under universal credit after organisations reiterated support for the proposal. In today's Work and Pensions Committee session, there was overwhelming support from witnesses, including the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and the Citizens Advice Bureau, for the UK government to make universal credit advance payments non-repayable grants instead of loans, to prevent people from falling into or further into debt. The UK government has said it fears that introducing advance payment grants for universal credit could see an increase in fraudulent claims. The SNP has proposed a solution to this, whereby advance payments would become non-repayable grants once the claimant has been deemed eligible for universal credit. This would take away the need to reverse the 5-week wait, which the DWP has said would be operationally challenging. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation has said that a short-term solution for people would pay some form of non-repayable grant up front, after they found that 70% of surveyed claimants who apply for an advance payment said they face difficulties as a result of the loan, with impacts occurring long after that first payment. Changing Lives, the Trussell Trust, Leonard Cheshire, Step Change, the Citizens Advice Bureau and the Child Poverty Action Group also made clear that they supported the introduction of grants instead of loans as advance payments. And Fatima, if I could come back to you, I mean, we are going to talk about UBI a wee bit later in the show. So on this specific point of universal credit, I thought the most telling thing about DWP policy was that when they realized that a lot of people were going to lose their jobs as a result of the coronavirus crisis, they immediately bumped up the amount of universal credit. So the standard payment went up by £20 a week, which to me suggested that they knew all along that it wasn't a sufficient amount to survive on. What do you make of their intransigence so far on this 5-week wait and the refusal to give grants instead of loans during that 5 weeks?
I make of it as like they've got the priorities wrong, simply. Like, I haven't really looked much into what they've been doing in terms of this situation, because I've been focusing more on elements such as the furlough scheme that we've got in place as well. But it is really telling that they've known all along how flawed this system is, and they're doing a little too late just now. So yeah, they've got a lot to answer for, and it is going to do us serious damage.
Yeah, and Effie, this does seem to be a point of principle for the Tory government, that people have to wait 5 weeks, which clearly will take them past any payday they might have been waiting for when they end a job, and that the only way they're going to get any money during that period is as a loan, which they then have to pay back from the universal credit, which is supposed to be the bare minimum you can survive on. It doesn't make an awful lot of sense, does it?
Well, it does if you believe in stigmatizing poverty. You know, if you believe in moralizing and saying that if you don't have enough money, you're bad, and if you are sitting on millions or billions, you're good, then it does. And it justifies it. It justifies it morally. It also does another thing. You know, debt is one of the biggest industries, the biggest and most profitable industries in the United States and also in the United Kingdom. It's a huge, big industry. And they are, a lot of their mates, a lot of those hedge funders and people like that, they are part of the debt industry. They sell debt. So it is in their interest. It makes sense to them, absolutely, to force more people into debt and poverty. So you create that, and then you advance them a payment to seem nice, so that the Sun can write about it in the Daily Mail. But on the other hand, what you're doing is you're forcing them to get into debt. So this goes beyond austerity. This is actually quite in my judgment, it's quite criminal. You don't do this to people who are, as you said, surviving on the absolute bare minimum, and it will either lead to tragedy, as we've seen, hundreds of thousands, I think the number on was it the Russell Trust? I can't remember what organization, 120,000 deaths, I think, have been attributed to the changes, but from the universal credit system to Ian Duncan Smith's eventual, how he changed it, and resulting from poverty and destitution. And then obviously, you have the UN report, which reported on child poverty. Great Britain at the moment, the United Kingdom at the moment, is the country where you find the highest child poverty in the whole of the Western world. These are very worrying statistics, but obviously they don't care. The country is about to become, they're building the foundations. It is going in the direction of the 51st state of the United States. So this is ideologically, if you like, and in terms of public protections and in terms of welfare, this is where this is going. So to them, yeah, it makes sense, and it is in their interest to convince us as well that it's a good system and it's the way to go.
Well, we move on now, and Boris Johnson has refused to rule out the threat of lower food standard imports flooding the UK market in a Tory-Trump trade deal, following questioning from an SNP MP. Speaking again at PMQs, Kenny MacAskill MP challenged the Prime Minister to guarantee high standards will be protected and rule out the threat of imports including chlorinated chicken and hormone-fueled beef. But Boris Johnson failed to give a commitment. The SNP MP for East Lothian said the thriving Scottish food and drink sector would be gravely threatened by reduced standards in animal welfare and production under a trade deal with Donald Trump's America. It follows reports that the Tories are planning a U-turn on previous commitments to maintain European food standards, which would open the door to low-quality imports. In January, the then Environment Secretary Theresa Villiers insisted that such imports would not be allowed, but the Tory government refused to enshrine protections in the Agriculture Bill, and Scottish Tory MPs voted against an amendment that would have done so. The threat posed to Scottish farmers comes despite agriculture being wholly devolved. All parties other than the Tories have opposed this power grab on Holyrood, insisting the Scottish Parliament have a formal role in approving trade deals affecting devolved areas. And Fatima, I mean, this was brought up by a number of people during the Brexit referendum and continually brought up by farming representatives ever since. This is a serious threat to the high quality standards that particularly Scottish meat has fought for decades to build up. How big of a concern is this, and do you believe that the British government will keep to its promises that people like Michael Gove, Theresa Villiers have made?
I don't think, well, if we're looking at the events and how it's going, considering that they voted against, we have the Tory government voted against an amendment to the agriculture bill as well. I don't think I can trust any promise that's been made from the current government. I don't think so. I really don't think that they have our best standards, our best interests at heart when it comes to the standards and food authority. It was raised repeatedly, as you mentioned, that this would hit us hard when during Brexit, if we were to leave the EU as well. Trading with America, who have, if you look at their food standards, it's actually appalling as well. That has been raised time and time again through reports. If I've even seen online, if you look at how they even process their food, and that's coming from a lot of the agricultural side, such as even simple things like chicken and all that. So I do feel that we are, trading with America, we are going to have a lot of concerns and a lot of, I think, health issues to start talking about as well. So I can't trust, speaking about promises being made by Michael Gove, I've never trusted the promise made by them because it's always been broken. So I have a lot of concerns there.
And Effie, what do you think the reason for this this is, where the EU standards were supposed to be something that we were embedding into British law, and yet now we're seeing that the Tories are unwilling to even put into law a commitment to not lowering standards in a trade deal?
Well, I've just brought up the trade bill just on my iPad on the left. The trade bill has now reached the committee stage, apparently, in the House of Commons, and I'm sure you know this already. It makes no provision for parliamentary scrutiny of any deal. So you're talking about Henry VIII powers here, pretty much an executive decision which cannot, by law, and will not be scrutinized by Parliament. This is beyond scandalous. I mean, we're touching here, I think, first of all, and this is no secret, The Guardian have reported on it, Byline Times have reported on it, Open Democracy and even the London School of Economics have reported on it. There is so much money riding on these supposed new deals. So an opening up to a deregulated reality for the United Kingdom. There's so much money riding on this that these powers, these organizations, these, if you like, this dark money is what brought Johnson and his friends to power. So these are the people that they serve, and they will do everything and anything in their power to ensure that these people and these organizations get their due returns. And this is the only way this could happen. You mentioned that it was promised, obviously, that EU law, the protections, and, we need, forget about, 10 minutes, you'll have to be here for hours to go through all the protections, 72 pesticides, which are forbidden within Europe. are used by American agriculture, the American food industry, the meat industry. So you're talking about actual poison that goes into people's food. And you see this in hospitalization of people for food poisoning and all the consequences that this has on their health. Now, were they going to ever enshrine this into UK law? Absolutely not. That's why Brexit happened, because they wanted to deregulate that market. Why did they promise it? But of course they would, because people would be frightened. Now, once they manage to, seize their vote, they can do whatever they like. And I'm just astounded that people are still not aware of this. This is about our children's health. This is about our own well-being. This is about pharmaceuticals. It's about pesticides. It's about the quality of water, about the quality of the air. All of these things will be affected. And as I said, I'm just shocked that, people are not aware of it, but not in the least bit shocked about the fact that it's actually happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, we now have a couple of stories here from the Scottish Government, and further measures have been announced by Tourism Secretary Fergus Ewing to support Scotland's vital tourism industry. A new Scottish Recovery Tourism Task Force will assist with the ongoing reset of the sector, and a provisional date of the 15th of July has been set for when tourism businesses may be able to resume operations, dependent, of course, on public health advice and progression to Phase 3 of the Scottish Government's lockdown route map. The task force will look at the sector's recovery needs, as well as actions being taken by the UK Government and the development of a new domestic visitor marketing campaign. The task force is in addition to the £2.3 billion package of support for businesses across Scotland, which includes measures specific to the tourism and hospitality industry, such as a full year's non-domestic rates relief and specific grant schemes which are not available elsewhere in the UK. And also, pupils living in Scotland's most deprived communities will benefit from targeted funding from the Attainment Scotland Fund to help close the poverty-related attainment gap. 9 local councils with the highest concentrations of deprivation in Scotland, known as challenge authorities, will share £43 million of investment from the Attainment Scotland Fund. In addition, a further £7 million will be shared from the schools programme between 73 additional schools with the highest concentration of pupils from areas of deprivation. The £50 million is in addition to the £250 million pupil equity funding package announced in May for the next 2 years, and an investment of £9 million to provide 25,000 laptops to assist pupil learning at home. To help mitigate the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, schools and local authorities will have flexibility to redirect some of this Challenge Authority and schools programme funding from existing plans to best support the most vulnerable and disadvantaged families, with a continued focus on equity in education. Fatima, there's some good news there that by the middle of July we might be able to look forward to some tourist spots being able to open up again. We heard at First Minister's questions today a bit of talk about when zoos would be able to reopen, for example. What do you think of Fergus Ewing's announcement today about a task force to help rebuild the tourism industry?
I welcome the announcement, of course. I did actually listen to what he was saying in terms of that, and our tourism industry is actually an industry that we rely on to help our economy. I think everyone knows that already. So it will be vital having that industry looked at and supported as much as it needs to be. So yeah, I welcome it. I don't know much about what's happening with the tourism industry just now, but I do understand that it is a vital part of the Scottish economy. Mm-hmm. That's mine. Yeah.
And Effie, coming to you on this question of education, obviously I know you have a daughter who's in school just now. What do you think about this, the pandemic effect on education? And do you think that a bit more money and some more computers and whatnot are going to be enough to help bridge the gap for some of these kids who are coming from quite deprived backgrounds and maybe don't have the support at home for a good home education?
You know what? It's probably the hardest question you could ever ask. Will a material help mean signify what will it signify a small material help, i.e. a laptop or Wi-Fi connection or what have you. I'm obviously, as you mentioned, I have a precious 12-year-old daughter who she's fortunate enough to have access to a laptop and an iPad and a Wi-Fi, and I can only be too aware of children who aren't. I speak to people all the time. I'm also part of the Widening Education Initiative within Glasgow University, who have done a lot to promote education for the more economically vulnerable classes in Scotland. So it's very, very close to my heart. The simple provision of a laptop or Wi-Fi connection will not mean suddenly entering a different world. If you don't have the support at home, it is still going to be very, very hard for these children to, if you like, bridge the gap, which is already very, very wide in their lives, be it because the parents are not able to help, because there is an addiction issue, because there is a health issue, because there is a housing issue, because there are other vulnerabilities, or be it that the child themselves have specific needs in terms of their own personality or what have you. So having the school present and having school teachers present has been for millennia the way forward. We have a situation now, obviously. I've just had a number of emails today from my daughter's going into high school now in August, to see how this is going to, obviously we don't know enough yet. They're going to tell us more in August about the actual physical presence of students at schools. I understand it will be staggered, and I understand that, again, there will be a lot of homeschooling. They're already planning for this because we don't know if there will be a second wave. All of these different variants have got to, we literally feel our way through this. We don't know what's going to happen. And there will be a large number of children who will still have to be schooled at home, be it that there is a second wave, God forbid, or be it that the classrooms are not able to take the full number of children that they're designed for. I would say that the initiative is hugely welcome. If you can have access to a laptop, it will make a huge big difference compared to if you did not have access to that laptop or to Wi-Fi. So yeah, by all means, go ahead and do this. But I feel that also other things have to be addressed. For example, my daughter's school, we've had phone calls, we've had constant contact between teachers and parents. We've had all this stuff going on. All of this needs to be part of a more holistic approach to schooling children, as opposed to just focusing on a provision of a specific tool or what have you. So it's got to be holistic, and especially for more vulnerable children, it really needs to be addressed, because these are the times children also live in environments where there is domestic abuse. That's another huge big issue that has to be dealt with. Every tool within the toolkit now has got to be deployed by governments to support these kids. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we come back to something Fatima mentioned earlier, and Scotland would grab the world's attention by undertaking a 3-year pilot of a universal basic income, the Scottish Greens have said today. The results of a feasibility study in Scottish council areas has been published, with a recommendation that Scotland commits to a 3-year pilot of the idea, which would provide a reliable, unconditional source of income for everyone. This would be co-delivered by the Scottish and UK governments alongside the local authorities. Responding, Scottish Greens Social Security spokesperson Alison Johnson said, "This feasibility study shows that whatever the challenges to introducing a universal basic income in Scotland, set at an adequate rate, it would have a potentially hugely positive impact on health, well-being, poverty and inequality at a time when inequalities are being exposed by the current public health crisis. As the world looks for ways to build back better from this global crisis, Scotland is well placed to take a world-leading role in developing new radical approaches that provide a real safety net for the most vulnerable people in society. A universal basic income is an idea which has entered the political mainstream, and I look forward to cross-party support for this proposed pilot. It's an idea whose time has come." And Fatima, as I said, you mentioned that earlier. And all the research behind UBI shows that it would solve a number, or could help to solve a number of the problems we've discussed today. That gap in income when you end a job and wait for universal credit. There's evidence showing that it reduces domestic violence, that it improves health outcomes, education outcomes for kids, especially from tough backgrounds. What do you think the chances are of this pilot being possible?
So I do recall the Scottish Government did mention to the Lib Dem leader that we would need more powers to make this sustainable. So more further devolution would be required. And my opinion of universal basic income, I've always supported it because I do believe, as mentioned, that it will be a fundamental safety net, and it will be really good for the economy as well. It would it's a long-term economic solution. And in terms of implementing it, Finland did actually do a study on the universal basic income, and it proved that it actually improved mental health and well-being as well, and employment. So they did this between, I think it was 2017 and 2018. It wasn't means tested. I think they gave it to about 2,000 people. And it wasn't means tested at all. It was given to you regardless of whether or not you had a job. And this was trialed between that. I think it was just over a year, between a year and 2 years. Yeah. And the benefits were evident in that study. So I've always been a vehement supporter of it. I do believe that it will really help our economy. It will actually lead to further protections for, if we're talking about domestic abuse victims, domestic abuse survivors, we're talking about the financial strain that actually keeps people within these within domestic abuse situations as well. So I do believe that it would actually resolve a lot of issues that are linked to financial independence too. So I do believe it will work if we're given further powers to implement this, and I support it, definitely.
And Effie, I mean, that domestic abuse question is one of the most fascinating ones. I think it's from a trial that was done in Kenya, where they found that giving a UBI to the men reduced the amount of physical abuse in amongst couples. But if they gave it to the women as well, then it reduced the amount of sexual abuse within the sort of marital rape and things like that, because women felt that they were able to say no. They had enough money in their hands that they could leave if they felt that they had to. It really is a fundamental difference maker to the whole society, isn't it?
I'm fascinated by what you've just mentioned. I was not aware of the Kenyan study, and I will absolutely look that up after the program, because you basically distilled the whole idea of a universal basic income, in 3 sentences. So to the male within, if we take the hypothesis of a couple, it will, as you said, I presume what this did psychologically, I'm not a psychologist, but it sounded like it almost enhanced someone's self-assurance, and that they felt that they did not have to, commit physical violence. And on the part of the women, as you said, obviously sexual exploitation and sexual subjugation is one way of subjecting yourself, of allaying someone's wrath. So if you have the money to get away from it, if you have the basics, you will do this without subjecting yourself to the sexual violence. It's amazing, and I think in regards to what you've just said, absolutely. I just wanted to say, even moving a little bit beyond the very basic stuff like abuse or physical abuse or sexual abuse, it will also enhance another side to enhance human spirit on a different level, and we need that. It will ensure that people who can give more do so without having to subject themselves to things like in-work exploitation. I personally know 2 or 3 pretty brilliant, amazing scientists who were not able to pursue research careers because they had to have a very basic job at all times. Now, these people, this isn't just a loss to themselves, it's also a loss to society. If we only allow people who have economic freedom and economic security to move forward and become researchers and doctors and lawyers and writers, we're missing out as a collective. So ensuring that everyone has access to dignity and to a dignified existence is going to benefit us all. And it's something that, as I said, obviously the urgency comes with, the exploitation, the physical violence. And yes, it will ensure that these reduce, or hopefully, will come to a halt and won't happen. But it also will open up the way for people who could be giving more to do so, and not be trapped within an exploitative job, or without being exploited and simply wasting their talents through their lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. As the UBI activist Scott Santons says, it's UBI doesn't pay you to do nothing; it pays you to do anything. And that's if you're interested in research on UBI, then he's one of the best sources. You can find him on Twitter
could you just repeat that name for our viewers and for myself
Scott
as well?
Santons, SCOTTSANTENS. You'll find him on Twitter.
Right.
You'll find him on Twitter. He's got a great pinned thread at the top of his account, which has all the research there's ever been on UBI linked. It's well worth looking at.
Thank you. Great. Thank you.
And while I'm at it, we did have a wee discussion about well-being economics and a bit about UBI in the show we did on Friday with Craig Dalzell and Catherine Trebek. It's well worth having a look at. And as well, we mentioned earlier a talk about the reparation that Glasgow University is making on its part in the slave trade. And we did a show last year with Graham Campbell, which is also well worth looking at. If you want to go and look those up, you should be able to find them both in our archives. But that is all we've got time for tonight. So I'd like to thank Sam and Fatima Effie and Fatima for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you. And we'd like to thank you at home for joining us as well. You're the whole reason we make these shows. Now, we would ask if you're able to afford it, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month can make a big difference. I know budgets are tight for everybody. They are for us here as well. So if you are able to support us, then please do throw a few pounds our way. If you're not able to, though, please don't feel bad about that. We do understand that times are tough, and even without the coronavirus pandemic, lots of people are really struggling to get by. We don't feel bad about that, but what you can do to make up for it is follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, find us on Facebook, just search Broadcasting Scotland, and share the show around with your friends. If you can build our audience, maybe one of your friends, maybe a family member will be able to support us, and you'll have facilitated that, so you're making just as big a contribution. And if you want to get involved in helping out here at Broadcasting Scotland, there's a lot of work to be done, whether it's as a journalist preparing the shows, working behind the cameras, producing the shows, or working in front of the cameras, doing what I do and what Gordon does. Then there's always opportunities here. So do please get in touch with us if you're interested in getting involved in building a better broadcaster for Scotland. That's what we're all about here. But that is all we've got time for. Gordon will be back tomorrow at 7. I'll be back on Friday with a special show, and then I'll be back as well on Sunday with the full Scottish. But until then, thanks once again to Sam. Sorry, I keep calling you Sam. I've got so used to having Sam.
I'm not even blonde.
I know. I've got so used to having her on the show that it's just the way it just trips off my tongue. But thank you, to Effie and to Fatima. It's been a pleasure having both of you on. And thank you for joining us as well. Have a great evening. Good night.